Hi everyone, today I'm sharing few watercolor painting techniques with you all which can help you start in your creative journey. Whether you are a beginner or looking to brush up on your skills, these essential techniques will help you master the art of watercolor painting. But first let's talk about material you'll need. All you need is a watercolor paper. I always suggest my students to get 300 GSM cold press papers. Brushes of your choice, round and flat, different sizes. Watercolor paints, you can choose palettes or you can choose the tube paints. Make sure you use the quality material for the best results. In today's video, I will be covering 12 different techniques of watercolor painting, so let's begin. The first technique is flat wash, and I'm using the big flat size of the brush. Flat washes are used to develop a solid area of color. You can always start with a first wash of clean water. Color is evenly applied while the surface is still wet using either horizontal or vertical strokes. Our second technique is gradation. A gradation or gradient can be created to transition from one color to another, or from concentrated colors to less concentrated colors. Again, we will wet the surface with a clean water. You can apply color in higher concentration at the first and then allow it to become less concentrated to create the transition. The third technique is wet on wet, which I often use. In this technique, you will apply the wet color to a wet surface, and it can produce a variety of interesting patterns and color mixtures. Some control is sacrificed using this technique. Clean water is the first washed into the areas where color is desired, and after that you can add the pigments of your choice. The pigments will be pulled by the water on the surface, creating patterns and mixtures. So make sure you are mixing the colors which won't turn into the muddy colors. And for this, you need to make sure that you know about your color theory, color harmonies, complementary colors. Otherwise, if you will randomly start mixing the colors, you might be ending up with the muddy shades. Our next technique is wet on dry. Perhaps the most common application technique is applying wet watercolor onto a dry surface. In this case, we are applying it over a solid area of dry color. Wet watercolor is applied over a dry surface. Brush strokes are easily controlled. Watercolor is transparent, so the color underneath will show through. Our next technique is called dry brush. By absorbing some of the water from the brush prior to apply color, a variety of texture can be created. This is perfect to create the texture on your rocks, tree trunk, or even on fruits. Color is first wiped away from the brush using a paper towel or a rag. With less color on the brush, the surface texture of the paper plays a role in resulting the strokes. Different brush types will produce different texture. Next technique is lifting color. Color can be removed or lifted after it has been applied. It's like an eraser. This technique can be used to fix mistakes, lighten value, or create texture. Water is applied to areas that are to be lifted. Heavier application of water will lift more color. Color can be removed using a brush, paper towel, cotton swab, or any other absorbent material. Scratching or indenting. Any tool that can be pressed on the surface can be used to create indentation while the surface is still wet. Salt technique. Salt can be applied to wet applications. As the paint dries, the salt will soak up the water and along with it the color. Salt is applied to the area that are wet. Table salt, sea salt can be used. When dry, the salt is removed using the finger. This technique produces interesting texture that can be used for many applications. I use this for the sky. Negative painting technique, where you paint around the subject rather than on the subject. So in this way you can see that I'm making some circles, but I'm not going to paint inside my circles. I will be painting around the circle. This is a great technique to understand the values of color because I will be using only one color. The first layer is diluted with water, so I'm using the tint of the color. After this will dry, then I'm going to apply the second mid-tone, and then I might add a little bit of black to create the shadow. The last technique for this video is using sponge. Texture can be created by applying the color using sea sponge or any sponge. I'm using just a normal dishwashing sponge right now. Color is applied by dabbing on surface with a sponge loaded with color, but don't use any water. The texture of the sponge plays a role in the resulting texture and patterns. Lastly, practice makes perfect. The more you paint, the more confident you'll become with the medium. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. They are all part of learning process. Now at the end, all my techniques are done on a small piece of a paper, so I'm going to store them in my journal. In this way, you can always save your practice and keep record of your own work. This way you can also be proud of yourself when you will progress in your painting journey. In next video, I will be elaborating some blending and gradient techniques by mixing 2 to 3 colors. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Do comment what other techniques you wish to see.